changing bearing materials. Come around here. Now, over in this area here, we're going to check out your hoses. Again, you're going to have to grab onto them to see if any are loose. You're going to have to look at the fitting area to see if you've got any leakage. And you're going to have to use your eyes to see if there's any kind of chafing going on. Okay, you don't want to get halfway through the work shift and have blown a hose. Now I'm going to bend down, I'm going to look underneath the circle area for debris, more than likely sticks and mud. If you have working in a clay area and you leave the mud caked in under there, it's going to wear out the bearing material a lot quicker. So get a stick, reach in there and poke off any of the mud that might be jammed up in between the teeth. This manufacturer has teeth on the outside, other ones may have them on the inside. Either way, clean the material away from it. Now while I'm down here, what I'm not going to do is cross under this drawbar. For safety's sake, whether the machine is running or not, you should never cross under the drawbar. Okay? If you keep that in mind, it'll help you in the long run. I personally know a grader operator who was killed doing that. 6 months from retirement, city employee. For some reason, he went under the grader, and for some reason that they hadn't determined yet, the machine went into gear and killed him. It happens. Check out the front frame for cracking again. Move up to your ball stud, take a look at it. If you see a lot of shininess, or if you've been getting some clunking while you've been grading, you might want to check this out. Proper way is to have a mechanic put on a magnetic gauge and check the clearance here. But a quick check for you would be simply to put the moldboard on the ground, roll the pitch back and forth a little bit, and have someone look here to see how much play is in there. They are shimmable on all graders. Okay, if you think you have too much play in there, get a hold of the mechanic. He'll put on a gauge here and check the tolerances. This area is important because this is what gives the grader the ability to achieve an infinite number of angles. Now we come to the front axle. Most graders these days are getting a lot better for the maintenance items, so there's few things to look for here. But again, it's going to be shiny metal. It's going to be hose condition. Your tires, again, inside, outside. Come around to the front. Check out the areas. Wherever you see a grease fitting, it's a wear area. Those are the ones you want to pay attention to for shiny metal. Debris, again, if you have debris on there, knock it off. Now that I'm at the front of the grader, I'm going to look up the frame to the whole front of the grader. Again, glass condition and lighting, mirrors, hoses, blade area, everything looks good here. Debris is gone from the push block. No debris here on the front of the axle. No collapsed components. Hose condition looks good. Tires, sidewalls, good condition. Radial area of the tire, great, no chunks out of it. Mounting hardware, tire pressures. And we're just going to basically come along here, checking for cracks, debris, look underneath once again on this side. Now that I'm down here, I may as well look at my cutting edge condition. As you have previously seen, if you have hollowed out cutting edges, they're not very good, and you as operators should be trying to maintain a straight edge, and it is possible. If you pay attention to it, it is possible to maintain straight edges. If you're doing finishing work, you cannot make grade with hollowed out edges. Again, ball studs, hoses, and cracking here in the arch area. Now here I am back at the grader. What I would do now, open up the door, latch it back. Get in the grader. That gear that I've put in the machine, I'm going to want to stow it. so that nothing's going to come out and bounce around. You don't want a pop can flying off, wedging underneath the pedals. I can personally speak to how surprising it is when you find out you can't stop and you don't know why when you step on the brakes. It's because a pop can's gone under the pedal. Once I've got the gear stowed, I'm going to look around and make sure nobody's around the grader. I probably want to yell clear, and I'll turn the key on. The first thing I'm going to do is scan all the gauges. All the warning devices come up and are activated. That tells you that they're functioning. Then I'm going to look at my fuel level. Fuel level can be considered a safety item as well. Imagine you're in downtown College Station, you run out of fuel halfway across a busy intersection at 4 in the afternoon. What's that going to create for traffic? Havoc. It's a safety item. Once I've seen all those gauges functioning, I'm going to start up the engine. After I start up the engine, again I scan the gauges to make sure all the oil pressures and the critical functions come up and are showing. Then I'm going to turn on all of my electrical equipment, everything in there, the heaters, the wipers, and the lights. I'm going to test the horn. Then I get out of the grader and I make another quick walk around. And here's what I'm going to do. When I'm here, I'm going to walk around, I'm going to look under the transmission area for leakage. I'm going to walk to the rear. Again, I'm going to look underneath the engine area for leakage now that the engine is running. And I'll continue walking around, checking all the lights. Rotating beacon, flashers, wipers, go to the front, check all that out. Then I'm going to come around, I'm going to get back into the grader. What I'm going to do now is turn off all the electrical equipment that I won't be needing right now. Then I'm going to check out to see that the operator's manual is present in the grader. Check again to make sure nobody's around. Now I'm going to do a brake check. I'll put the machine in forward, in low gear, and I'll creep slowly forward, and I'll apply the brakes to make sure they're working. Then I'm going to put it in reverse. Look behind you, back up slowly, listen for the backup alarm to see that it's functioning. Step on the brakes, see that the brakes are functioning again. In order to check to see if your signal lights and brake lights are working, you should have a helper. If you don't have a helper, try and back it up close to a building where you'll get the reflection. Okay? Once I've done my brake testing, then I'm going to slowly creep forward and check the steering function. Make sure all the steering components are working well. I'm almost ready to start the day, but before I do that, and even though the weather might be nice outside, you want to cycle your hydraulics. Go through the cycle once, just to warm up the oil. Now that I've done that, I'm almost ready to go. What's the last thing I need to do? Put on my safety seat belt. Safety seat belts these days, almost all manufacturers have a 3-inch wide belt, and they're very comfortable. And they're very easy to get used to wearing, the same as your safety vests. Very easy to get used to wearing them. Okay, so I've covered most of those items that are generic to all graders, how you should inspect your machine daily. At the end of the shift, I'll lower my attachments first, I'll lower my mull board, and while the machine's running, I might want to take a quick walk around once more, just looking for signs of fluid leakage, putting it in its service position, and shut the machine down.
My name is Ernest Galindo, and I'm with the Texas Association of Counties. Now, if you look around, this is a true representation of county employees. We have a lot of experience around this group. The fact is, some of you and some of us, we're no longer spring chicks. And it's a lot easier for us to get injured. When we talk about a piece of equipment, regardless whether we're talking about a maintainer, front end loader, mowing tractor, grade all, it doesn't matter. The type of injury that we normally see among operators is what? Anybody? Anybody?
Death.
Death? Well, some of them, they do end up in death. But the prevailing type of injury coming from a piece of equipment like this, slip and falls. Now, Russell indicated that 3-point contact, which is 2 hands and 1 foot, or 2 feet and 1 hand. And that's how we go in, and that's how we get out. The fact is, this happens too often where the operator jumps from the top of the machine to the ground. Not only are we jumping, but we're jumping onto an uneven surface. And that's how we see how you injure your ankles, your knees, your hips, your lower backs, and right now, a prevailing type of injury among operators is rotator cuffs. Rotator cuffs, if you don't have a good handle getting in and out of the piece of equipment, and if you slip, guess what's going to happen? You're going to try to regain your balance with one arm, and all 150 pounds of you are going to be directed to the shoulder, and you're going to tear up your shoulder. As an average, it's taken us about 6 months for you guys to come back to work. But one thing I want to emphasize, whether you hurt your lower back, your ankle, your knee, your rotator cuff for sure, your body's never going to be the same. So you have to be extremely careful when you get in and out of the piece of equipment, because those are the injuries that we see on a regular basis. Now, another practice that we see out there is trying to use the blade to get into the piece of machine. Now, the fact is, you're working on surfaces that sometimes you may be dealing with wet surfaces, sometimes you may be dealing on muddy conditions, snow, you name it. If you're not careful getting in and out, you're gonna land right on top of that blade. And that's how you're gonna wind up with a very severe lower back injury. So we have to be extremely careful when we get in and out of the piece of equipment. One more thing I wanna point out to you is working around this area, never get or avoid getting in between the tandems when the machine is running. You never know if the machine is gonna kick it into gear, and you may not have a chance to get out of there on time. This machine has a lot of blind spots. If you're standing over here, if you're a spotter on the ground, if you're a flagger, if you're a road hand, if you're standing over here, your operator is not gonna be able to see you. So you have to be extremely careful when you bring new personnel to the work site, when you have part-timers, when you have volunteers, when you have trustees working for the county. They need to understand that just because you're sitting way up high, you may not be able to see them. So keep that in mind. When you bring new personnel to the work site, make that part of the orientation before you allow them to go into your work zone. You're in control. Thank you.
Fellows, my name's Marvin Epperly. I'm an operator out of the Coal Valley demonstration area and Sacaton, Arizona demonstration area for John Deere, one of 6 product applications consultants. And I'm humbled and I feel privileged to be here in the midst of all this wisdom. I see a lot of years, a few whiskers, and a lot of wisdom mixed in with this crowd, and that I could be allowed to share with you somewhat the